In Ukraine, as in many other countries, law enforcement and security agencies are closed systems with their own rules and mutual support. In time of war, the number of security-related and military organizations greatly increases, and the number of people in their ranks swells massively. The potential for abuse and infringement of civil rights is huge and is a risk for any country at war. On top of that are the tens of thousands of war crimes being committed by the invaders. My guest today is an expert in the law and judicial reform who is ensuring Ukraine makes progress on these fronts to defend individual rights and liberties, even in wartime. Welcome to Silicon Curtain. If you enjoy the material we create, then please do like and subscribe to help people find the fantastic speakers that we feature on the channel. And of course, do please consider becoming a patron. Olena Sotnyk was a member of the Parliament of Ukraine from 2014 to 2019, is a human rights defender, lawyer, advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, is a Rasmussen Global Senior Representative in Ukraine Millennium Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Olena is a well-known legislator and a public policy maker in areas such as rule of law, judicial system reform, anti-corruption, Euro integration, and youth policy. She has successfully represented Ukraine in the international arena and is one of the leading voices of Ukrainians against Russian aggression. Olena, I'm delighted to welcome you to the channel.
Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, thank you for having me.
Let's start with Kiev Day, because this important and what is usually joyful holiday in the capital city of Ukraine has predictably enough been marked by Russian attacks, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's true. We experiencing these attacks for the last, I would say, few days, like each day and at night, and now during the day. So they even changed the strategy. They tried to terrorize capital city, and of course, it's hard to explain. People, of course, tired of all this situation. I mean, you know, you're waking up in 4 or 3 in the morning, and you are going to the bomb shelter, waiting when our anti-missiles system fight with this enemy's drones and rockets, and then you're coming back to the bed, probably have some time to sleep before you go to the work. But you know, that's a new reality of Kiev, and I think that's very important to highlight, that the strategy of Ukrainian authorities and our partners to you know, allocate here and to equip not just Kiev, but I think that's very important, to equip all the cities with anti-missile systems. That's the only one way how during the war we can continue, you know, go through the war and this back front. I mean, Ukrainians who are very committed, who are very determined, continue to live their lives, continue to pay taxes, continue to, you know, nevertheless, like their businesses, and just to go to work and continue, like, you know, to sustain the whole country. That's very important to defend them from Russian terror, which is like obviously unprecedented accordingly.
And psychologically, it doesn't work, does it? I mean, the strategy of bombing London in the Blitz didn't work. People were more determined to resist. And the same is happening in Ukraine, isn't it? I don't quite understand why the Russians seem to think terror weapons are going to suddenly make people, you know, change sides or capitulate. It has the opposite effect.
You know, we shouldn't like think about the bombing Kiev or other cities from the perspective of just like frightening people. Of course, Ukrainians, they already demonstrated, you know, readiness to oppose any terror from Russian side. We saw blackouts during the winter, and people continue to go through the winter, and we did it. You know, we saw massive rocket attacks and missiles when we didn't have such effective, I would say, air defense system, and now it's much better. Now we have seen this regular attacks of drones, and of course it's hard to say, like, you are not scared. Of course, like psychologically people feel that this kind of fear, but it's not fear because of the enemy. It's more about, like, you are not safe. That's the way how you feel, but at the same time you realize that that's kind of new reality. And I think that Ukrainians, they found the way how to go through this. And you're absolutely right. Russians, they definitely didn't succeed in frightening Ukrainians. In opposite, Ukrainians became more united, became more determined. And if you look through the last research of Ukrainian public opinion, like more and more Ukrainians, they are sure that Ukraine will win. They are ready to go through all this till the end, etc., etc. So you're right. Psychologically, it didn't work, and it's not going to work. But from the military point of view, of course, it's not about just frightening people. It's also about, their the way how they're trying to distract our defense system. So they're trying to just put here in the cities the main defense system, Ukrainian, defense system, and at the same time, when we have counteroffensive operation, to use their air forces in order to stop this counteroffensive operation. So it's not like totally psychological thing. It's also military operation, military logic, and like, now we are all experts, military experts somehow, but somehow it works. But at the same time, we've been prepared to this, so I'm sure that our army absolutely can cope with this situation.
And of course, there is an economic effect, and we know that Russia utilizes the economy as warfare. In fact, it utilizes everything it can, including literature, culture, and everything else, as part of its aggressive operation. But do you also think there's an economic angle to this continuous bombardment on civilian infrastructure?
Yes, absolutely. Like, there are different assessments from World Bank, from Ukrainian authorities, also from independent institutions. So, but that's absolutely evident that, for example, Ukraine lost more than 30% of GDP for the last year of the large-scale invasion. Earlier, we lost also a huge part of our incomes due to occupation of Donbass and of course annexation of Crimea. A lot of resources, natural resources allocated on these territories. It's also like huge loss for the economy of the state, and of course war in general. That's the biggest risk for any investments, for any development of the business. That's why definitely Ukraine loses each day this income, not just government, not just budget, state budget, but also like businesses. I would highlight that I really believe, because I know from the ground, what does it mean to sustain in these conditions? What does it mean to continue businesses, to continue pay salaries, provide this workforce, and etc., etc. That's like really kind of also fight. Like these people, they're heroes because they continue to operate, to produce and to pay taxes nevertheless, even under missiles attacks, without electricity, sometimes without water, with all this interruptions, disruptions, etc., etc. That's a huge challenge. Definitely, I believe that at the same level as our army needs support in terms of weapons, our businesses and our people, human resources, they also need support in terms of sustainability and this sustainable survival, if I can say like this, of the economy of Ukraine, because we need to remember that army is important, is the most important in the war, but at the same time, of course, this economic warfare also influences a lot. And if we want to continue the fight, we need to have strong back front. We need to have strong way of and very determined way of supporting our businesses and supporting our economy, because Ukrainian economy is bleeding. At the same time, yes, we know that sanctions against Russia have been very harsh, I would say even unprecedented, but still, like thousands of very famous big Western companies, they are operating in Russia. They didn't stop the separation. They continue to pay taxes to Russian budget. And it means like in indirect ways, they continue to finance Russian war against Ukraine. So I think that it should be like very strong ethical call to this companies to get out from Russia, even though I realize that there are a lot of pragmatic interests, but sometimes you need to think strategically in terms of global order, in terms of global security, etc., because today they're thinking about Russian big markets and incomes, and tomorrow they will lose all the markets, because we don't know how Russia will behave if they continue to sustain their war machine. And they continue, because you can look through their budget. They increased financing of the military industry, they increased financial of military forces, etc., etc. It means that they are not going to stop.
That's right. They've returned to a sort of Soviet-style economy, haven't they, where everything is being burned up and used for the military-industrial complex. And, for those who point to the West and say, yes, but the West also invests in armaments, the percentages are very different, aren't they? I mean, if we talk about anything from 1% through to about 5% in Western societies, the spending on defense, in Russia, you're looking at a huge portion of their national wealth going into, well, this pointless warfare.
That's true. And also we need to take into account that from many Western countries and NATO states, this increasing of the military budgets, it's first of all, the first and the main goal, deterrence. So you are like just preparing in order not to have a war, like, from this old Rome quote, like, if you don't want war, you should be prepared. So that's the main case. And in case of Russia, that's absolutely clear that it is about aggression, that it's about, of course, destruction of the world order. And of course, the stakes, especially for Putin, they're so high. For him now, it's more existential fight, because if he is going to stop, if he is going to lose this battle, it means like for him, I'm sure that it is the beginning of the end of Putin's regime.
Yes, that seems very likely. If you understand the Russian mindset, weakness is not to be tolerated, and a loss in war is the ultimate sign of a failure in a Russian leader. Well, let's turn to Ukraine, because we've talked about the economy and the challenges of that. We've talked about the challenges of being under bombardment and yet having to carry on working, perhaps with sleepless nights. Another area where Ukraine, it stuns me how this is possible in wartime, but you are still making changes to judicial reform, still working on, rule of law, legislation, and indeed civil society does seem to be strengthened in wartime. I know this is your area of expertise. We'll talk a bit in a minute, hopefully, about the case against the police that you were involved with, because that's a sort of extraordinary victory. And I think that's something that many of the audience will not be aware of. But both Russia and Ukraine came out of the Soviet Union and, were trying to, Ukraine at least trying to, emerge from the sort of Homo Sovieticus kind of mindset and dismantle, the Soviet architecture of the judiciary and so on. And you've been very closely involved in this. How is it possible to carry on making those reforms even in wartime? And of course, anti-corruption measures as well.
First of all, a lot of people there are talking about anti-corruption reform and judicial reform. So I would say that it's very important to understand domestic context. First of all, we don't need reform. We need implementation of the existing laws. So Ukrainian anti-corruption system, yes, I've been involved very actively in a lot of drafting and initiating different laws and also anti-corruption institutions like Anticorruption Bureau and State Investigation Bureau and Anti-Corruption Court. That was during my parliamentary work, and I was one of the authors of changes into these laws and also of these laws. And it's not a problem with the legislation. We have one of the, I would say, best, more deeply systemized anti-corruption legislation, and also all the preconditions for the judicial reform in terms of, one more time, legal point of view. Now the main challenge for the last 30 years, it is implementation. We had a lot of good efforts with nice initiatives, with really goodwill in terms of legal structure, but absolutely no active involvement in order to really implement this infrastructure. So nowadays, more or less, we are moving fast with anti-corruption institutions. They are all on the place. They started to operate properly. For example, the last one was this anti-corruption court. It was when I was a member of the parliament, we just founded this court. Now it's in a full-scale operation. They already have a lot of the practice in anti-corruption area. So now the question is, what is an obstacle, to have this system on the ground in terms of large scale, I would say, and without exception implementation. And of course, the first and the main problem, it is some kind of principles in mentality within the system, because you are right, we have some kind of legacy from Soviet Union, and we didn't build new institutions of the Soviet Union. We just transferred primary institutions into new ones, sometimes just change the table or name, but the psychology, the principles and the values of the systems, they stayed the same. And I think that war in this case is helping a lot, even though it can sound very cruel, but I think that's kind of shock. That's kind of stress test for the system. And it's really works. I can tell you from the last months, when we saw, for example, this anti-corruption case in the Supreme Court with the head of Supreme Court, I can tell you that many people, they've been so frustrated, Ukrainians, because okay, this is a new institution. We just selected new judges there, and we've been expected, okay, at least, this highest level would be clear, and they have nice salaries, very high salaries. So we did expect from them some kind of transparency and integrity. And then we see this case. Of course, from the first point of view, it is frustration, disappointment. But from another point of view, if you think deeper, that's a success. Because even during the war, even if it's disappointed, it means that anti-corruption system continues to work. And even the high level, this is the highest level of judges, even the high level of judges, they are not untouchable. And I think that's one of the first signs of recovery. That's one of the first signs that really we are moving to in the right direction. And there is a track of irreversibility of punishment. The same case, previous case with Ministry of Defense. Yes, it could be like disappointing. And, you know, many probably Western partners would say, oh my God, there is a corruption. We are helping Ukraine, but there is a corruption. Yes and no. There is a corruption within like particular, like, you know, area, but we determined it. And now we are punishing it. It means like we are stopping this practice. And it's very important that Ukraine doesn't hide these cases, but making them public and like demonstrating to the whole world that even though we are risking with the support of the West, we are ready to be committed, you know, to moving forward in order to fight with these cases, even though they're high level, they're super risky in terms of reputation, etc., etc. But I think that's a good signs of recovery of the system and recovery, first of all, of the mindset of high officials and of this, I would say, you know, it's not Soviet mentality, but it is some kind of old style way of thinking. I think that war brought this very high stakes, and people, they are not ready to tolerate corruption anymore. People, they are not ready to tolerate, you know, when somebody is dying on the forefront, that somebody will get bribes, etc., etc. And the pressure from the civil society, from the public, from the ordinary citizens in terms of really anti-corruption reform. And first of all, I think, and the main judiciary reform would be the main pressure even before the war over. Even now we can feel it, we can see it, people seeking for justice, they want changes, and I don't see any way how to, you know, to avoid this in terms of authority actions.
And ideally, you know, the fact that people at the top are being convicted sends a signal down the vertical, you know, or down the pyramid to people lower down that this is unacceptable behavior.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that that's sometimes we have, you know, this dispute about what is like punishment and you know, this dilemma, legal dilemma, punishment or prevention. So I believe that that's like two sides of the coin. It is impossible to prevent crime if there is no irreversibility of punishment. And that's the way how to prevent crime, to demonstrate that there is no exclusion. So there is no exclusivity. Everybody is equal. And I think that the last cases, it is about this. At the same time, I believe that still we have some kind of space to develop. For example, yes, we have very good system in terms of, you know, investigation and then conviction and I mean in anti-corruption cases. But still, the generally judicial system is not effective. So sometimes you can spend in a court for 5 years in order to get the decision. So or sometimes you are not, of course, it's not like, it's not still decided. I'm not telling you that there is no corruption at all in the judicial system. So I think that there are a lot of things to develop, but at the same time, we need to work in the area of all these procedures, rules, etc., to make them transparent. And I'm like liberal from my ideology, from the point of view, from political point of view. And I believe less regulations in Ukraine are better. Because when you don't have this human influence on taking decisions, you will have less problems with corruption. And that's the best way for Ukraine to move on. Even though if we have any risk like of abuse or something like this risks are much lower than to have corruption on the, this medium level or bottom level, when you have some kind of obstacles to solve with some human beings who should take some decision. So I think that's two directions of the road. So one direction, it is punishment, justice, effective judicial system, and at the same time you need to have system which doesn't have too many ways how to avoid, how to put pressure or how to get some corruption benefits from the decision.
Mm. Yeah, and that, of course, will help the economy as well, because what you need after the end of the war and victory is not just a rapid economic growth and reconstruction, but as you say, you need a high level of transparency in how those reconstruction funds are deployed.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the main expectations, not just of international partners, I would say, because I can hear from everywhere, like international partners expect from Ukrainians expect from Ukraine transparency and absolutely balanced and clear rules of the reconstruction and interim, by the way, rebuilding. Because also we need to remember that we are not like this, we don't have the same case as Afghanistan or Iraq or some other countries. We have like institutions on the ground which are operating pretty well. We have business infrastructure. We have rules. We have, yes, maybe not super effective, but still effective financial system. We have very good digital system, like of many things, not just like, governance, but also banking system is well digitalized. I can compare it with, Great Britain and other countries. Like my bank in my account, I can do anything from any, like, any part of the world within like several minutes. So, and I think that's very important because it's very vibrant, some kind of atmosphere here. And we need to give also opportunity to local businesses, to local producers to participate in this reconstruction, because they struggled a lot. And when we are talking about transparency, about rules, about opportunities, we shouldn't wait till the end of the conflict. We shouldn't wait till the end of the war. We need to implement them now, because, I was like driving on Sunday just around the city, just to see what is happening around. And there are a lot of things going on, a lot of interim rebuildings of the bridges, of the ruined houses, etc., etc. It means like there is an opportunity now, and we need to provide this opportunity to all who want to participate, to all who want to help Ukraine, to support Ukraine, but also to cooperate with Ukraine. Because, if we look through the case, for example, of Afghanistan, like a lot of money been wasted, like really wasted, because of inefficiency, because of non-transparency, because of lack of research, because of lack of strategy. We don't want this with Ukraine. We want to like think wisely about spending our money, but also money of our Western partners, and also to give opportunity to all who want to really participate in this, not just to spend their money, but to earn. And I believe that's some kind of opportunity.
And of course, it's very important as well, isn't it? Because Ukraine's future security is intimately tied up with accession to NATO and the EU. So do these two sort of accession policies also provide a stimulus to tackling the kind of reforms that you've talked about?
First of all, I need to highlight that here I'm super passionate about the idea of Euro integration and Euro-Atlantic integration, because I believe that whatever our partners say, what kind of interim security guarantees they are trying to find, there is no better guarantee, both, not just for Ukraine, but both for Ukraine and our partners from NATO alliance. There is no better way than to accept Ukraine as a member, because we are going to have, first of all, one of the biggest armies in the Europe, one of the most experienced armies in the Europe, well-trained armies, and this army already on the battlefield tested like a lot of weapons, and they know what is effective, what is not. And more than this, they like really can be super effective in terms of rebuilding collective security, because there are a lot of problems in collective security of NATO. And we're not going to talk about this because it is a separate discussion, but I think that here is the main advantage why NATO member states should accept Ukraine as soon as possible. Of course, for Ukraine, there are also benefits, because Article 5, it is an important article, but already Ukraine demonstrated that by ourselves, but with the proper support of partners, we can defend ourselves, and we are ready to defend ourselves. And that's the biggest difference with many other countries where citizens are not ready to defend their countries. And I think that's something which people don't want to talk a lot, but we need to talk about this. There are not too many countries which are ready to go out from this comfort zone and to think about risks in the futures. And there are a lot of risks. So, of course, NATO is one of our aspirations, and that's the way where we are moving forward. At the same time, thinking about strengthening our capacity and defense now when we are by ourselves. I mean, in terms of union, of course, not in terms of support. And at the same time, Euro integration. Everything what is happening now, what is going to happen next years, everything will be framed with Euro integration process in Ukraine. So we already set up a plan of our accession process. We hope that we are going to be accepted and start this accession process in the end of this year. And I personally believe that it is the best way how to build in Ukraine this absolutely new system of rules, compliance, and all other standards, which is going to finally, move Ukraine from maybe this last but still influential parts of legacy of Soviet Union. That's the way how we are going to rebuild the whole mindset and how we are going to really become very strong. I'm sure about this, very strong and absolutely new kind of partner in terms of European Union.
Now, my last question really relates back to the title, and it's a particular case you were, very intimately involved with, and it was a great success. But it speaks to a wider issue. During wartime, police institutions, military institutions have extraordinary powers, and of course they grow significantly. They have to under the circumstances. But you were involved in a famous case where an individual was raped by police officers. And, if we go back to, say, perhaps the Soviet Union, that case may never have come to light. And indeed, never mind the Soviet Union, in many societies, the police are in some ways untouchable, and often they protect their own, and these crimes don't, come to light. In London recently, there was also a case where a police officer actually committed a murder in this case, and it took quite a long time to actually uncover that. So this stuff does go on. I'd love to ask you about, that case in particular, but also the wider issue of how to tackle these closed institutions like the police secret services and so on. How do you stop abuses taking place within that environment of secrecy and closed protection?
Yeah, that's one of the probably my life-term missions, because you are absolutely right. I remember when I came to the parliament, that was one of the first things I've been thinking about, because I came from Revolution of Dignity as a human rights defender, as a lawyer, a pro bono lawyer of protesters, and I saw many abuses from that time militia, not police, which is very different, because when you even this semantics, when you have militia, it means from military point of view, so it is like really very about, first of all, about force, and when we are talking about police, it is about rights, about protecting rights of the citizens. So even semantics here plays an important role. But I remember this abuse, and that the main problem was that you can't do anything. Like, they're so strong, they've been so powerful, so that you don't know how to uphold this. And I think that in case of Ukraine, during the Revolution of Dignity, the only one thing was that so many people went out to the streets. It was like more than police, so it could sound like even some kind of very simple, in a very simplistic way, but that's true, because we've been like several hundred thousands. They couldn't do anything, and they had to, just to keep this perimeter and not like really doing something. But then they started to catch people in a smaller places, and to beat them, and etc., etc. And that was the moment when I felt, okay, if we are not going to change this, we are not going to be really free, and we can't really protect our rights. We can't express our visions, etc., etc. It's not about democratic country, so it should be some kind of the border between, order, and providing this order, and of course within your rights, and how you are going to express your visions and your opinion. So that's why when I came to the parliament, one of my first draft laws was about police. So to change militia to police, but in general to change the whole principle from this, law enforcement to more law and right protective bodies. Of course, it is a long term, and you need, first of all, education. You need to change society. You need to change culture. You need to change somehow these basic values, etc., etc. But one more time, I need to remember that somehow war, because it started in 2014, not in 2022, just to remind our audience, war changed a lot, and people, they became, I would say, more, from one side, more maybe stronger in terms of protecting their rights, and at the same time more demanded in terms of this abuses and punishment in case of abuses. So when this case of raping women became public, it was shock all over the country. Everybody been really shocked, because it was 5th year of the war. Everybody already been very strong in terms of human rights defense, etc., etc., because we've been experienced in Russian aggression a lot, and civil society became very strong. So we didn't expect that something like this is still possible. So I'm not going to tell that immediately it was justice. We, as a human rights defenders, heard that probably this case will be buried, you know, in all these procedural things and not proceed with a proper investigation. And that's why, of course, I've been trying to get together a strong team of lawyers, women lawyers, because it's also very important. Rape in Ukraine, it's a very sensitive issue. We know that it is underreported. Many people, they don't want to go to police. They don't want to go to this, they think, embarrassing procedures of investigation and then courts. So that's why we decided it's very sensitive, and we organize like group of women lawyers. We organize this pro bono defense for this victim, young girl. And 3 years, it took us 3 years to go through the investigation, to go through the court. We still expect appellation, so it's not like finished, but we believe that verdict is so strong and well, you know, argumented that there is no case like that they will avoid punishment. But for Ukraine, you're absolutely right. That's a breaking moment, because we could prove to the whole society, it's not just about this particular case, but to the whole society, that even this closed system could be punished, could be cracked. Still, you can like put them into the court. You can seek justice, etc., etc. I think that's very important, because it's not only one. It's not the only one case in my practice. I have another case, which because of the war now on force, but it's also about abuse of the police, of their authority. They beat the young boys, and I step in this case, and I'm going to finish this case. It's already in the court. But I think what is important, it is like, you know, to brick by brick, to break this wall, and to show that there is no walls between law enforcement bodies and between human beings. First of all, we are citizens. We are paying taxes. We are paying taxes to their salaries to protect us, not to beat us, you know, not to kill us, and not to abuse their authority. It should be absolutely supervision. It should be also civil control over both security services. I'm sorry, I know it's very like sensitive issue, especially now, but it's very important, because sometimes security services also misuse their authority. The same and the main, it should be civil control over law enforcement bodies. And it's not just about Ukraine. It is about many countries. We saw what happened in the United States. We saw, you just mentioned situation in London. So it is about us, about citizens, to demand and to fight for our rights. And I think that my case, it is just a bright example that it is possible, and it's worth to fight for justice in order to avoid these abuses in the future.
And ultimately, this is what Ukrainians are fighting for, isn't it? It's to become a free society with civil rights, not a closed, abusive society, which we know that Russia is. Now, I know we're out of time, Olena. It's been incredibly insightful and inspiring to hear about the work you're doing. And I wanted to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak to me. And of course, Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.